Hi everyone, we're live. Welcome to Testkube's Office Hours. This is a virtual space where we open our office doors to you to talk about Testkube, Kubernetes, and testing in general. Today I am joined by our amazing QA lead, Tomasz. Tomasz, say hi.
Hi, nice to meet you all.
Yeah, introduce yourself. Go tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, so I'm a QA lead at Testkube. I'm responsible for quality-related things in general, so basically making sure our users get exactly what they expect, that everything works correctly. So I design testing processes, I introduce different testing rules just to make sure everything works correctly, and we get the feedback related to quality as soon as possible. So we are not only guessing that it should work, but we know we have some confirmation that everything is fine constantly.
Perfect. Yeah. You're our savior. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining. And today by the way, my name is Ale. I did introduce myself. I'm Ale. I'm developer advocate at Testkube. I currently I'm the host for Office Hours. And yeah, we're ready to talk about really important things regarding testing. So in a few releases back for Testkube, we released a really important executor which was in 1.7, we released a JMeter executor. JMeter is a tool used for load testing, and it's pretty much used for analyzing and monitoring, usually web applications. But we want to dive deeper on how to use this when Kubernetes is involved, what happens, and how to do it easier with Testkube, obviously. So we have a lot of questions that we get asked frequently by our users, our community, and just to talk about it in general and what are the advantages of using JMeter and especially with Testkube. So Tomasz, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what is load testing and performance testing.
Okay, so I will start with performance test first because that's the biggest group, the kind of the kind of test. So basically, the performance tests, their goal is to understand how the product behaves in terms of performance. So, for example, what are the limits? Will it handle specific required load? Will it auto-scale? And for example, we get a huge amount of users suddenly, or what's the point where it will break? Because that's something that will also need to check. And basically, the performance test can be divided into different categories, like a load test, for example. So the goal of the load test is to identify areas worth optimizing, like possible bottlenecks that we'll need to identify and probably we'll need to fix them. And from the other side, stress tests is just trying to kill the application. So trying to find the load where it will break, when it won't be able to work correctly anymore. And it's not like randomly trying to just kill this application. It's more like analyzing everything, planning the really detailed test plan for performance tests, then executing it and doing a lot of nodes to analyze every single aspect that may be important, because then we will need to analyze these results. And it will allow us to understand how the application behaves in general, in terms of performance, what are the limits, and basically if we can depend on it, if it will meet our expectations. So basically trying to build the confidence in the product in terms of performance as the whole.
Amazing. Super powerful too. So a tool that does this is JMeter. Can you tell us a little bit about what JMeter is?
Yeah, so JMeter is the load testing tool that's among the most popular ones. It's definitely a project that's really mature, so sometimes it may seem like it's like too powerful because there are so many options that can be used there that it may be frightening at the beginning. But in the end, it's like a really powerful tool that can be used for almost everything in terms of performance or load tests, to be more detailed. And that's one of our latest executors that we support. So basically, Testkube now supports running JMeter test easily.
So more specifically, what kind of tests can we run with JMeter? Is it strictly Java-based applications, or what's the gist with JMeter tests?
Sure. So it can be used to test almost any web application. That's the goal. I mean, the limitations are so high that in most cases it won't be limited by the tool. It's more like usually the performance tests are more like limited by ability to run them. That's one of the things. And the second one, sometimes even more difficult, how to design the performance tests properly so they will answer specific questions, because it's not like that we just want to hit the application with some random load or we want to increase it. We first, every time that we create some performance tests, we need to design them so they will answer very specific questions. Like, for example, we have some expected user load that we need to meet, that we need to make sure the application will handle it. Like, for example, we have some important event. We expect there will be some huge load, some massive load, and specific date, for example. We can, for example, try to simulate it, make sure, and confirm that it will actually work. And that's what JMeter can be used for, to just answer very specific questions that we want to ask, that we want to find answers for.
Awesome. And talking about maybe some challenges when you're running JMeter, but Kubernetes is involved. For example, from a developer perspective that's not familiar with Kubernetes, you may get really confused as to how to navigate the whole process and where to find the logs, how to use, how to navigate the pods, or maybe getting even access to them. But what do you think are more specific challenges that you have that you can identify from a developer perspective, but most importantly from a QA perspective, which is your perspective?
Sure. So for me, Kubernetes is like a really powerful tool that's also quite difficult to learn. I mean, the learning curve is pretty steep there. And when you would want to create, to run the JMeter test with Kubernetes, you would need to configure everything manually, prepare everything. You will know what you want to achieve. And Testkube just makes it simple, because you can just create the test. Testkube provides you the nice abstraction over the Kubernetes. Like, for example, the test custom resource that makes it simpler to define it. Or you can just use our dashboard and just create everything with a graphical user interface in like really convenient way.
Yeah, way easier. And we actually will show you in a bit how it actually works. But can you dive more into the specifics of how the JMeter integration works? What's happening? Like you mentioned a little bit about how we have it as a custom resource, but can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So when you have your JMeter project, all you need to do is just save the project to the JMX file. So that's a standard format for JMeter. And when you already have this file, I mean, you created your own tests, performance tests in JMeter, and you have this file. That's all you need to do to run it with the Testkube. So we can create new test, import this file, and we'll pre-configure everything that's needed. We'll create the job, run the test. You will get very detailed logs directly from JMeter. And if you need something more customized, then you can still introduce some customizations over it. You can customize, like, for example, the pod size, what should be the hardware resources used for running the specific test. So all of these things that are possible with Kubernetes can be done with Testkube easier and like really convenient way. And that's the biggest benefit for me as the QA, because I have various test types that I need to run every single time. I mean, one of the goals is to get the quality feedback fast and constantly. So I will always know what's the state of the application, if it works correctly or if there are any problems that need to be fixed. So that's one of the goals. And with that many different test types, for me, it's the great thing that I can integrate all of these with Testkube. So no matter if it's the Cypress test or if it's the Maven test, or maybe it's JMeter, and we'll show some examples today, I can run all of these tests in the exactly same way. And that's the huge benefit, because I don't really care what's the infrastructure beneath it. It just works correctly. And it's really important for me because I don't need to think about the maintenance. That can become very complex. For example, in the Testkube project, that's another interesting thing. We use Testkube for actually testing Testkube itself. So this whole self-testing concept is very interesting here. But the great thing is that we have every our test defined with the test CRD. So that's the custom Kubernetes resource that allow us to describe the test in the high level. That's the abstraction that Testkube provides. And we have all of these different tests, like Cypress K6 and any other executor that we support. We have all of these tests in our repository, and then we can use Testkube for actually running this, to getting the results, analyzing logs. So we are the first users of Testkube, basically, I mean, the development team. And that's the great situation. I mean, we can notice things easier and faster than in case they will be just like some end users in the end.
And that's how you know it works and that it's good, because our own engineers are using it on the daily. Well, maybe we can jump on some examples. You ready?
Yeah, sure. So I will just share my screen.
Okay.
Okay, so I should now see my screen and example JMeter project I created. It's really simple. So there is just some HTTP request, in this case, to our Testkube website. Then we have a response assertion, so checking if the website returned 200 response. And then we have assertion, so getting the results of this assertion and displaying it. And all you need to do to run the project, and in this case it's really simplified on purpose to just be a great example, but even if you have like a really complex JMeter project, all you need to do is to just save the test plan, and you have this JMX file. So I already saved this one as JMeter executor smoke, so basically that's one of our smoke tests that we use for testing Testkube. And if we want to run it, that's pretty straightforward. I mean, I already have the dashboard running, and I will just share the different. Okay, so here's our dashboard, one of my local environments, at least. And if we want to create the test for this JMeter project, we have this JMX file already. All we need to do is add a new test and fill it with the form. Let's name it JMeter Office Hours test. We can optionally add the label, so we'll be able to use filters and gather some results and view it as a whole. Like, for example, we have the label for our core tests, like executors, and then we can just filter the dashboard using it. But we won't need it right now. Let's just set the type. So there is the type named JMeter test that will run the JMeter with the JMeter executor. And then we need to define the test source. So where the test will be get from, we can use file and just attach the file that we just created, exported from the JMeter. So maybe let's use this option. And then you just have the standard dialog. So let's just navigate to, maybe I'll just make it a bit bigger. So let's just navigate to the Testkube directory I have locally. Then we have different test types, and there is the JMeter, and that's the exec file I just saved. I just exported from the JMeter. So we just hit open, create, and the test is created. Now you can run it. So let's just click run this test now, and the execution has just started. You can see that's our initial test for JMeter. It's now running. You can display the execution logs here, and as you can see, the result is green. That has just passed. There is just the simple assertion. So the return 200 was correct. And we just executed our first JMeter test. You can check the CLI tab to get the CLI comments, if you prefer this way of using Testkube, because that's another advantage of the Testkube for me as the QA, that I can do it in the way I prefer. So I can use it with the dashboard using graphical user interface. I can use the CLI and just use the console. It's sometimes faster for me when I already know specific parameters or comments. And I can also use it for automation. And then on top of that, we have CRDs, so custom Kubernetes resources. So for example, if we want to get the result of this test in CLI, we can just copy the get execution command that we have here. And it will allow us to get the result in CLI. So that's the exactly same test result that we just saw in the dashboard, but this time at CLI. We can also create the test using CLI. So I'll also show you this one because it might be interesting. This time we will use the Git repository instead, so it won't be exactly the same. We'll use exactly the same file because we have it in the repository, but we'll create the test in the different way. So all you need to do is to use the testkube command, and then you can use help to check what's possible. So for example, we have the create resource command. In this case, we'll use this one to create the test. So testkube create test, and then you need to define the name. Like for example, JMeter Office Hours 2. So that will be our second test that we'll create here, this time using the Git as the test source. So we have the test name. Now we need to set the test type. So that's the type command. Or maybe I will show you another help for the create test first. So you can display the help for any of the commands that are available here. So you can get the list of possible parameters. Obviously, you don't need to set all of these. I mean, usually setting just 3 or 4 of these would be sufficient. But there is quite a lot of possible configuration options, so it will match your needs in almost every case that may exist. But let's go back to creating this test. I mean, we already have the test name. Let's extend it with the test type. So in this case, that's JMeter test. And then we need to set the test source or the content type. So that's the content type parameter. Just a second. Yeah, that's the test content type. Test content type, and in this case, it will be the Git file, because that's just a single file in the Git repository. We use first checkout to check out the whole repository to make it faster. So in this case, we'll check out only this single file. Then we need to set the repository URI. So that's the parameter named git URI. I will just copy this one. You can, in this case, we use GitHub, so all you need to do is just copy this one directly from GitHub. And then we can set the Git branch. It's optional, but let's set it. Git branch main in this case. And then the last one, Git path. So that's the path to this JMX file in our repository. So in this case, we have all of the tests in the test directory. So that's test, JMeter, executor test.
Do you think you could zoom in a little, Tomasz? Just a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's better.
It should be better now.
Just so that we see. Yeah, way better.
Okay. Yeah, so that's the directory with executor tests, where we have all of the tests that are used for making sure our JMeter executor works as expected. So we have the smoke test that we just ran. We have some tests for validating edge cases. We have the test that should be failed by design. So we just make sure everything works as expected before the release. And that's also how we use Testkube for testing itself. So that's really powerful, because if we make sure the results are correct first, so I mean, we have some tests that aren't run with Testkube, then we can use Testkube for almost everything else when we already can trust it is working correctly. and that's extremely powerful. So we have this executor test directory, and then the name of our test file. So that's JMeter executor smoke JMX, and let's create. Oh, I just made some mistake here. Some incorrect parameter probably.
Oh, I think you wrote git batch instead of git path. Yeah.
Yeah, so
there
that's
you go.
the one. The most difficult mistake to notice. I mean, just a single typo, and then I would spend like a minute to notice what's wrong. Okay, so the test is now created correctly, and we can now run this test. Let's try it with CLI again. So there is the run command. You can also display the help here, and you can just set the resource name here. So we can run the test, and then the test name that we just used. So that's JMeter Office Hours 2. And the test is being executed. You can use the watch command to get the results immediately, to show to track the whole execution. And there is I probably made another typo. There is probably some. Maybe I will copy the command that I'm sure works, because I probably made some typo here. Okay, so this test already exists. Okay, so this one is now created, and let's run it. Or we can use the dashboard to check it, that this is created, it's now executing.
Yeah.
And everything looks fine now. So I just made some typo. That's what usually happens during live demos. I mean, everything is prepared, tested. I know it works, but then I just made some typo because I wanted to write everything manually instead of using autocomplete that I use usually. Yeah, but now you can see it works correctly, and we can also check the this test is now successful. There aren't any artifacts. Or there is one. Yeah, so there is additionally the JMeter report you can then use to check the logs from the test execution. You can then analyze it, import to another tools just for some additional processing. And we just ran the JMeter test really easily with Testkube instead of configuring everything manually. And one more feature I need to mention: when you create the test with CLI, you can additionally use the CRD only option. So the Testkube won't create the test, but it will create the CRD that can be used for creating this test using kubectl apply. So that's how we handle our tests. So basically, we write or generate the test CRD. So that's the Kubernetes abstraction. That's the kind of test. We can define everything related to our tests here, and then we can use kubectl apply to apply this resource. And we can it really simplifies the test maintenance because we don't need to edit everything manually. If we want to change something, we can just go through all of the files easily, replace whatever we need, and just run it. So it really can make things simple. And with the CRD only argument, it's like pretty straightforward to just generate these files.
Amazing. Thank you, Tomasz. Thank you for that amazing demo. We wanted to, we have a question from a user, Jonathan. He asks, besides JMeter, can you recommend a load or performance testing tool that also works with Testkube?
Yeah, so currently we support JMeter, Case 6, and Artillery as the load testing tools. And I can recommend any of these. I mean, all of them are really powerful. And in the past, I preferred JMeter because it was possible to make everything there. But in real life, I now prefer to use Case 6 because it's just simple to set up. It's really simple to implement some initial tests and then extend them. And you don't need to configure everything in graphical user interface. You can just write your tests in JS. And it can be pretty powerful because you can use external libraries. And you can create exactly what you need in maybe more development-friendly way.
And speaking of K6, we have our office hours with K6 coming up next week. So be sure to get notified for that. Don't miss it. But going back to JMeter, because we were talking about JMeter, yeah. let's talk, summarize, just to wrap up. What would you think are the main advantages that you have as the QA for Testkube by running JMeter with Testkube? What do you think are your main advantages?
Okay, so maybe I will say about non-functional tests in general. So basically, in most cases, when I created tests in the past, I had to configure everything separately, like some tool for functional tests, and then it was difficult to introduce some proper non-functional tests, like performance tests, for example, because they always require different setups, different tools, and these setups can be tricky, not only to set up, but also to then maintain. And that's what Testkube makes simpler for me. Being able to configure everything in exactly the same way, using, for example, the CRDs or using dashboard and creating every single test in the same way, no matter which tool is used. I can then customize it when I need it. Like, for example, in case of JMeter, first thing I would need to do is to customize the hardware resources that will be used for running these tests. But again, Testkube makes it simpler because we can override the default job template that we prepared, because we have the baseline that's suitable for most of the standard cases. But then we can easily customize it using the job template. So that's the job template parameter in CLI, or you can also do it in CRDs. And then you can override any option related to the test execution, related to execute your job. So, for example, if you want to limit like CPU, or you want to guarantee that the execution pod will get some kind of resources that will be enough for running, for example, like a really complex test in JMeter, then you can customize it easily. So for me, it's a combination of two of these things, like being able to run it easily in exactly the same way, no matter what's the tool, and also being powerful and allowing me to customize things whenever I need it. So combination of these two things makes, for me, the Testkube as the perfect tool for QAs, because I can do everything in the same way instead of just focusing on maintenance. And usually the test maintenance is already difficult enough to make sure they are always up to date. And being able to build the infrastructure in the easier way, that's the huge benefit.
Yeah, I do agree. I do agree that even as a developer, that's a huge advantage, just having to focus straight into what you need to do, which is testing. So thank you, Tomasz. Yeah, thank you so much. That was amazing, a great demo. Thank you all for watching. If you want to read more, Tomasz is releasing an article pretty soon also about JMeter, talking a little bit more in depth about everything we discussed in this video. But please make sure to check out testkube.io. You can check all our docs there. You can check all our information on how to use JMeter and other executors. We're also very open to contributions. We're open source. And we also look forward to having your feedback. So make sure to reach out, join our Discord, of course, and check us out on GitHub. Any closing thoughts, Tomasz?
Yeah, so I think the best thing is to just try Testkube yourself, and then you will realize what can you do with it. I really recommend you to just try things, because that's probably the most exciting things, at least for me as a QA. I mean, trying new things, experimenting, trying to understand how it works, what can I do with it, and basically how it can improve my everyday work.
Perfect. We have an amazing demo up, demo.testkube.io, where you can just play around with it. And yeah, we'll see you in the next office hours. Thank you so much for watching. And yeah, have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.